Hey brothers and sisters, welcome to The Port. Today's part 1 of chapter 6, our final chapter in our series of the book of Ephesians. We're going to be looking at 9 verses, so let's just get right into it. Starting in verse 1. Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord. For this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and your mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you will have a long life on earth. Now, I'm reading from the New Living Translation, okay? Just let everybody know. That's the chair squeaking, so please, sorry about that. The first thing I want to address here is the word, it's not an issue, it's the word obedience, okay? Or obey. It says obey your parents. This word actually means listen to your parents. Listen to your parents. Now, in the New Testament, there are several words that are translated as obey or obedience. The first word is parfikia, which that is the word obedience, which we give to God and those in authority. We see that word parfikia in the book of Acts, chapter 5, verse 29, and in Titus, chapter 3, verse 1. The second word is pithos. That's the obedience that means to be persuaded by truth. And we see that word, obedience, in Romans 2:8 and in Galatians 5:7. The word here, that's quoted here for obedience, is the word kupakalo, which means listen or attend to. So it's important. That's an important thing. So obey your parents, actually listen to your parents. Now, we know that children are at times, sometimes are taught to blindly obey their parents. You know, they are essentially forced to live under the law and are denied an opportunity to grow in grace. Now, let me say that laws are important to protect kids. Like, you got to put laws on your kids because, like, for instance, don't run across the street. That's all. Don't rush into the road. That's a law. Like, don't touch the hot stove. Don't. You're going to get burned. Laws are good, but we need to learn we need to teach our children as they grow how to walk in grace. And the best, what does that look like? And the best example I could give is and my wife and I, we actually did this through our, we did it like, it just felt right. And now I know that it was the Lord teaching us to teach our children grace. Like, for instance, I didn't just want my kids to obey us because the commandment said so, or because God said so, or the commandment said so. I wanted them to know. That we love them, and that and that our intention was always the best for them. That is what grace. That's what teaching them to grow. Not just do it just because I said so. That is law. That is what law does. Do it just because I said so. And in this passage, it says to obey your parents. It says for this is the right thing to do. Again, listening to our parents. We taught our kids to listen to us because we love them and we wanted the best for them, and it was smart. What do you say? It's the right thing to do. What Paul's basically saying here, listening to your parents who love you and want the best for you is the smart thing to do for many reasons. And that's what Paul is talking about here. And the shame is that a lot of people who don't understand grace, who are legalistic in their mind, in their mentality, they read these words, these laws, and it's obedience without question. Just obey, because I said so, which is, by the way, the worst way, in my experience, is the worst way to raise kids. And I have adult children. Because legalistic parents ultimately harm their children, And the unfortunate thing is that we're not people who are under law, we're people who are under grace. And God has to teach us grace, and we have to be open to God, learn how God teaches us, and then we teach that to our children. Now, a very important question that should come up here is that why is that the Apostle Paul, who is the apostle of grace, quoting the fifth commandment? And why is he quoting the fifth commandment to a non-Jewish church? He was talking to the church in Ephesus. And that's a legitimate question. So let me first begin by saying that he is not doing it to put these people under under law. But he's trying to show them that honoring parents is the good and right thing to do. Treating your parents well, and your life will go well. That's basically, he's being very, very pragmatic. If Paul were preaching law, he would have to include the penalties of breaking the law. Okay? Under the law, the penalty for dishonoring or cursing your parent was death. Paul never mentioned that because he was not putting them under the law. Now, however, Jesus mentions the penalty of death when he quotes the same law in Matthew 15, verse 4. But we need to put it in context, and the context is different. Jesus was talking to religious leaders, teachers who taught about the law, who felt that they themselves were walking in the law. And in chapter 15, when you read in verse 4, they were the teachers of the law were attacking Jesus' disciples and saying, hey, you guys are not following the law, and you guys shouldn't be doing that. And Jesus then turned it around and said, well, you guys violate the law because you guys are supposed to honor your mother and father, yet when your parents need something, you discard them because you're saying you have work from the Lord to do. So you're dishonoring your mother and father. So Jesus and Paul are preaching different parts of the same law to different audiences for different purposes. There's a beautiful, beautiful similarity here. One is using the law to silence the self-righteous, and the other one is using it to illustrate a timeless truth, which is that honoring your parents is a good idea. Okay? Whether you're under the law or whether you're under grace, it's a good thing to honor your parents, okay? And let me again emphasize that I always want to emphasize this. There's a need, folks. You know that everything that Paul asks, and I've said this before in many of the teachings, anything that Paul asks us to do, I believe that he always had in his mind and his heart that this would be done by the power of God through us. So this is something that God does through us as we trust and surrender. I can tell you from personal experience that a lot of the things that especially concerning my children, that both my wife and I learned, we were people who were literally being led by the Lord because, some of you know, we didn't have. The kids don't come with instruction books, and we have the scriptures, but we ourselves were still very immature in our knowledge of the Lord. We didn't understand grace the way we know it now. But I, as I looked back and as I was reflecting, I realized that God was being very gracious with us. He was moving through us and just teaching grace to our children while we were raising our children. Beautiful thing, just a beautiful thing. So remember that it's always the life of God in you that's doing this stuff through you. Verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way that you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and the instructions that comes from the Lord. Now, the word here, father, while fathers are being addressed here, most commenters, people that write commentaries, acknowledge that it is fair to see that those instructions are being written to both parents. Though the Greek society was patriarchal, Paul addressed mothers through the fathers. So let's get into that. Do not provoke your children to anger. What does that mean? Do not provoke your children to anger. Let me get practical application. Basically, don't be harsh with them or unrealistic with your kids that they could get angry and upset, Don't provoke your children to wrath. One of the things that I see that God did through my wife and I is that we communicated to our children. Anytime we did something, let me give one of the examples I'm going to give you is one time, it was, believe it or not, it was when I was pastoring a church. I was working on my messages and stuff, and my kids were little, and they would come and they would want my attention, and I would get, guys, leave me alone. I'm trying to work on something. I'm a pastor at the time, okay? And I remember just being really just mean to them, And then after I was done, I was like, man, what a jerk. And I remember grabbing both my girls and my oldest and my youngest, and saying to them, hey guys, look, I'm really sorry that that I yelled at you guys, and Daddy was being a real jerk. And I remember that Tori said to me, yeah, Daddy, you weren't being a real jerk, and things like, and I love that because, it was just funny. But I always I had no problem when I failed, my wife, when we failed, to go to our children and say, hey, we were wrong, and to communicate things to them. Like another example of like when our kids were really little, there were things we didn't allow them to watch for a season. There were things. But then as they started getting older, we didn't want to say, well, don't watch that. We wanted to always to teach them and believe, folks, we were raising our children, by the skin of our teeth. It felt like that. We were just by the grace of God. So anyways, so our kids wanted to watch things, and so they'd say, oh, they wanted to watch a scary show or something that their friends were talking about, and we wouldn't necessarily say no. We would explain to them what that was about, and we would tell them, this is what this is about, and sometimes they would watch it, and we go, you want to watch it? Go ahead, or we'll. We were close by. We let them watch it, and then they would come to us and talk to us about it, and that we did that with everything. And what it created unintentionally is that we didn't do it with the intent. It was unintentional. Our kids would then always come to us for things, and it was. I think that's God manifesting grace through my wife and I. And then as I grew in grace, and my wife as well, we started to understand that we were operating this whole time by the grace of God. Another example of the grace of God was that I experienced with my oldest, that there was a season, both my wife and I, there was a season that my daughter was questioning her identity and her own sexuality and everything and all that stuff that young people go through. And the one thing that I always emphasized is that I said to her, and I always emphasized, and this is what the grace of God is all about, that I said that no matter what she chooses, that I will always love her and anyone that she's with, that she will never be rejected from me. She will never experience rejection from me. And while she was going through her whole process, she kind of worked it out on her own, and she always came to us and asked questions, and she got all that straight in her own heart, in her own mind, in her own head. And she got cleared on her own personal identity and her as a woman and all that. That got cleared, but the key thing that stood out is that we kept the door of communication open. That we communicated love no matter what. And I believe that that's what the grace of God is. And does that make sense? We just, that's how God is with us. And it's amazing when you extend that incredible amount of, hey, I don't care where you're at, I love you. It's amazing what love and the power of God does in an individual's heart and soul and spirit. So we do our best not to become unrealistic, harsh with our children, okay? But the Bible actually says to bring them up, in this passage, it says bring them up, A child's heart is like soil. And in this soil, we can sow good seeds of God's word, or we can let the devil plant his stuff, We want to sow good seeds into them. My wife and I could tell you from experience, we did our best to talk to them, to give them wisdom, and to instill in them love and unconditional love and grace and mercy. And we instill that. Jesus said to make a good tree or make a bad tree, right? Our children, we can make our children good by teaching them the good ways, or leading them to the Lord and being open and communicating with them and leading them to the one who loves them unconditionally, because the one who has clothed them with righteousness, or we could teach them bad and send them unprepared into a world and legalistic and judgmental, and let the enemy get in there and corrupt them and hurt them and abuse them, So it's amazing. So we're told to bring them up and to teach them. The word discipline here means to train your children. Folks, I just want to emphasize something. That now. Some of you are listening to me. Maybe you have little kids. Maybe you already, this season of your life is gone. But let me just tell you, from my experience, I didn't know any of these things, but I know that the grace of God was guiding me through these times. So, anyways, So the word here, discipline, means to train. Let's continue. Verses 5 through 8. It says, slaves, obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. Serve them sincerely as you would serve Christ. Try to please them all the time, not just when they are watching you. As slaves of Christ, do the will of God with all your heart. Work with enthusiasm as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that the Lord will reward each one of us for the good that we do, whether we are slaves or free. Now, obviously, none of us are slaves, and none of us have slave masters. But this could be applied to employers and employees and employers. Okay, so Paul is pretty much, you can say, is commanding us here to to serve our employees with sincerity, with respect, and with enthusiasm. How do we do that? Well, first and foremost, we do that by understanding that as we're serving them, we're serving the Lord. As we're serving them, we're serving the Lord. And the second way is that we do those things by the strength of God in us. We serve them with enthusiasm. We serve them as we're serving the Lord by Christ's strength in us. We say, Lord, teach me how to serve. Teach me how to see these men and these women, people that I'm serving, as if I'm serving you. Give me the understanding of that. And it says, with enthusiasm. So it's a work of God, because it's really hard to be enthusiastic, And I want also to point out, remember that it says that we're going to get a reward. What reward? The reward, Christ rewards only the works that come by faith. Christ will only reward the works that come by faith. The only thing that remains in heaven as treasures in heaven that remain eternal, the only works that last forever are the things that Christ and his life does through us. Only that which is of faith gets rewarded, because it's Christ in us. It's only the things of faith that get rewarded, not the works of the flesh, not the works you have to muster up. All right? So the last verse is verse 9, and it says, masters, treat your slaves in the same way. Don't threaten them. Remember, you both have the same master in heaven, and he has no favorites. Again, we translate this master and employees, bosses, employers, and bosses. Employers, treat your employees the same way. Don't be, again, this is something the Lord, if you're leading someone, you don't threaten them, you don't bully them. You treat them the way Christ treats you. And we do this through the strength and the wisdom of Christ. Christ teaches us how to treat those who serve us. Amen. So we'll stop right there. I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget, please, to hit like and subscribe. By the way, just a quick note on subscription. A couple of days ago, I dropped a video thanking everyone for all the subscriptions. I had 82 subscriptions, and it was confirmation that God wanted me to continue to do that. I dropped that 2 days ago. Since that, my subscriptions have gone up to 93. And I saw it this morning. I started to cry a little bit, and because I was so moved. Again, the Lord has used you guys to encourage me to continue to do this work, and I'm so excited and so blessed. Thank you. And this will continue to keep going. This will continue to be a port of hope for anyone that needs encouragement and hope. God bless you guys, and looking forward to talking to you guys again. Bye-bye.